Have you ever felt it? A quiet, almost imperceptible shift inside you, like a whisper rising from beneath the noise, telling you something is changing, but you can't quite name it. You look around and everything seems the same places, the same people, the same routine, but something inside of you doesn't respond the way it used to, as if your spirit is gently stepping away from a version of life that no longer fits. You wake up one morning and silence feels louder. The things that used to comfort you now leave you cold. The conversations you used to enjoy feel shallow. The goals you used to chase seem distant, almost foreign. You begin to wonder, what's happening to me? But this isn't a breakdown. It's the beginning of a breakthrough. It's the first subtle sign that your spirit is transforming. Carl Jung once said that every transformation begins with a death, not of the body, but of an identity, a role, a mask. Something within you begins to dissolve, so something more truthful can rise in its place. And this process doesn't come with clarity at first. It comes with disorientation, uncertainty, sometimes even grief. Because the life you built may no longer feel like it belongs to you. This moment, this strange silent in-between, is not a sign that something is wrong. It's confirmation that something deep is awakening. Your soul is not interested in repetition. It is not here to fulfill roles or impress shadows. It is here for truth, for meaning, for alignment. And when the soul begins to stir, the surface starts to crack. You may feel tired, but it's not the kind of tired sleep can fix. It's the tiredness of carrying a life that was never yours to begin with. And as that life begins to fall away, you are not falling apart. You are shedding. Let that sink in. You are not lost. You are being reconfigured, and no one else may notice. Because transformation is quiet. It doesn't happen in loud declarations. It happens in sighs, in pauses, in the long stare into a mirror that doesn't reflect who you feel you are anymore. This is where it begins. Not with answers, but with questions. Not with direction, but with stillness. This is the sacred space between who you were and who you're about to become. So if you felt the disconnection, the distance, the longing for something you can't yet name, take a breath. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. And that is the sign that the best stage of your life is quietly preparing to begin. It doesn't happen all at once. One day, everything feels normal, comfortable, predictable, familiar. And then quietly, it doesn't. It begins with a subtle sense of discomfort, a strange friction between who you are and the life you're living. You can't explain it logically. It doesn't show up in words. It shows up in your breath, in your silence, in the pause before you respond to the world. You start noticing how much effort it takes to pretend you're fine, how tired you feel after being around people who used to energize you, how the routines you once relied on now feel empty, even pointless. The same food tastes different. The same music doesn't move you. The same places don't feel like home. Something has shifted, but what and why? This is often the first sign, not a dramatic event, not a crisis, but a quiet internal resistance to what no longer aligns. You wake up with questions you never used to ask. Why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? Does this still matter to me? And in the background of your everyday life, something begins to unravel. Your job, your relationships, your identity. They all begin to feel like clothes you've outgrown. But instead of taking them off, you keep trying to squeeze yourself back in. Because they're familiar, because they once fit, because change is terrifying. And yet, the discomfort keeps growing. Not because you're broken, but because your soul is expanding. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation. A journey of becoming who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who you pretended to be, not who others expect you to be. And this journey begins with dissonance, with the feeling that the story you've been living is no longer your story. So you pause, you listen, and what you hear isn't loud. It's soft, barely a whisper, but it's there. It says, "This isn't it. There's more for you." But first you have to let go of what's no longer true. That's the hardest part, the letting go. Not because the old life was perfect, but because it was known. And we fear the unknown, even when it's where our truth lives. So if you feel like something is off, not wrong, just off. If you feel like you've been sleepwalking through your life, if you've stopped recognizing the person you've become, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're waking up. And that, as uncomfortable as it may be, is the first true sign that you're about to begin the best stage of your life. It's strange how loneliness can appear in the middle of connection. You might be surrounded by people, family, friends, colleagues, yet feel as though no one truly sees you. They see the version of you they've always known, the one who smiles, the one who's dependable, the one who fits their idea of who you're supposed to be. But you're changing, and because you haven't found the words for it yet, you carry the shift in silence. It feels like drifting, like watching the world move around you, but not quite feeling part of it, like laughing at jokes that don't touch your soul anymore, like showing up but not being present. This isn't depression, it's dissonance. It's your spirit stepping away from what no longer resonates. And when you try to ignore it, when you try to keep playing the role, you feel it even more. The ache, the emotional fatigue, the quiet frustration. Because pretending takes energy, and you're tired of pretending. Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest burden a child can carry is the unlived life of the parent. But as adults, we carry the unlived life of our past selves, the expectations we built our identities upon, the choices we made to be accepted, the compromises we believed were survival. Now those choices feel like cages, and so you withdraw. Not because you're broken, but because something inside of you is asking for space, to breathe, to unfold, to be without explanation. Solitude begins to feel like a sanctuary, not a place to hide, but a place to listen. You might walk slower, speak less, notice the trees, feel the silence in a room more than the noise. You are not becoming less of who you are. You're beginning to notice what parts of you were never really yours. This stage can feel lonely. It can feel like you're disappearing. But what's really happening is that the false layers are fading. You're not vanishing. You're revealing. And in that revealing, your inner voice gets louder. The one you used to ignore. The one that whispers what you truly want, even when it scares you. That voice isn't dramatic. It doesn't demand. It simply insists. And as it grows, the world you built out of expectation begins to tremble. But this trembling isn't collapse. It's rebirth. When you start to question what you've always accepted, when you choose to sit with your discomfort instead of numbing it, when you allow yourself to feel lost without rushing to find a new identity, that's when transformation takes root. Not outside, inside. So if you've felt distant, quiet, unsure, if you've been seeking solitude not to escape but to remember you are not alone, you are returning, slowly, bravely, to the self you left behind. And that return is the beginning of everything. There comes a point when the questions grow louder than the answers. You try to go back to the plans, the goals, the habits that once made sense. But something inside of you resists. Not because it's lazy, not because it's afraid, but because it knows the truth. Those paths no longer lead where they used to. And so you begin to hesitate. You delay decisions. You feel torn between what was and what's trying to be born. Between the comfort of the familiar and the call of the unknown. This is not weakness. This is the tension of becoming. Carl Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And this This is the moment when your darkness begins to speak. Not in chaos, but in clarity. It shows you the places where you've betrayed yourself, where you said yes when your heart screamed no, where you stayed quiet to keep the peace at the cost of your own. You begin to see the patterns, the way you've shaped yourself to be liked, to be accepted, to be needed. But now the price is too high. You can no longer live in contradiction. And so the old identity begins to crack, not with violence, but with truth. It doesn't shatter all at once. It erodes, gently, consistently, until the mask becomes too heavy to hold. And in that space, in the quiet collapse of your former self, you discover something you had forgotten. The real you has been waiting beneath the expectations, waiting beneath the achievements, waiting beneath the need to be seen, to be enough to belong. The real you doesn't need a role. It needs permission to exist, to speak, to breathe. And here's the paradox. The more you let go of who you thought you had to be, the more you become who you've always been. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to meet yourself. That's the essence of transformation, not becoming someone else, but remembering what the noise made you forget. So if you feel confused, if the world doesn't make sense the way it used to, if you find yourself questioning everything you once believed, you are not falling apart. You are waking up. And waking up is messy. It's disorienting. It's beautiful. So be patient. You are not late. You are not broken. You are right on time for the life that's been waiting for you to arrive. At first, it feels like coincidence. You think of someone and they message you. You speak a truth you've long avoided. And the next day, you hear it echoed in a song. You stumble across a book, a quote, a stranger's words, and it feels like the universe was listening in on your soul. This is not magic, it's alignment. When your inner world begins to shift, the outer world starts to respond. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, meaningful coincidences with no causal explanation. But to your spirit, they are signs, confirmations, clues that you are being guided even when you feel lost. You begin to notice patterns, repetition in numbers, themes in conversations, emotions that surface at just the right moment to be healed. You begin to realize life is not random, it is relational. It mirrors your inner state, not to reward or punish you, but to show you who you are becoming. And so the signs keep showing up, subtle, unassuming, but unmistakably timed. A conversation that unlocks something deep, a dream that won't let go of you, a silence that somehow feels full. You start to pay attention. You stop brushing off your intuition. You begin to trust that your feelings are valid, that your discomfort is intelligent, that your longing is sacred. And when you trust, you soften. You stop forcing. You stop rushing. You begin to walk with presence, to listen with your whole body, to see beyond the visible. Because now you understand what you call coincidence is often confirmation. Confirmation that your soul is not asleep, that your path is not lost, that something greater is speaking to you through life itself. You are not being tested. You are being invited. Invited to release the need for logic, to let go of control, to enter a conversation with the unseen. This is not about superstition. It's about surrender. Surrendering to a deeper intelligence, one that doesn't need proof-only presence. So if the signs are showing up, if you keep hearing the same message from different mouths, if the world feels unusually synchronized, don't question your sanity, question your readiness. Because when the signs grow louder, it's usually because your soul is preparing you to say yes to something new. And saying yes may not look dramatic. It may simply look like being still, like trusting the silence, like choosing not to run. Because sometimes the most powerful decision you can make is to stay present long enough to receive the message that was meant only for you. There's a moment in your awakening when you stop asking for clarity and start searching for meaning. Not external meaning, not someone else's definition of success or happiness, but something deeper. something that makes your soul feel awake. You begin to crave purpose, not the kind you can write on a resume, but the kind that makes you feel alive when no one's watching. You start asking quieter questions. What truly matters to me? What do I feel called to give, not just receive? What would I still do even if no one ever applauded? These questions aren't always easy to answer. Sometimes they echo in silence. Sometimes they lead you to tears before truth. Carl Jung believed that true purpose is not chosen. It is uncovered. It lives in the unconscious, waiting to be remembered. And remembering requires stillness. It requires honesty. It asks you to let go of the life you built, just to survive, so that you can create one that lets you thrive. This kind of purpose isn't grand or glamorous. It doesn't always make sense to others. It might even look like failure from the outside. But on the inside, you feel aligned. You feel whole, because you're no longer acting out someone else's script. You're writing your own. And that script may start small. It may begin with saying no to things that drain you, with choosing rest when you're used to overachieving, with creating space for what nourishes you before you know exactly where it leads. Purpose isn't a destination, it's a direction. It's the quiet pull toward what feels real. And as you follow it, you stop needing constant validation. You stop chasing applause. You begin to walk with an inner rhythm that honors your own becoming. And yes, some people may drift away, not because you've changed too much, but because you finally stopped shrinking. But in their place, you begin to attract people and opportunities that resonate with who you truly are. Not the version you performed, the version you remembered. So if you feel that pull, the longing for something more meaningful, more honest, more, you follow it. Even if you don't know where it's going, even if the path looks unclear, even if you're afraid, because that longing isn't an escape. It's a return. And the moment you honor it is the moment you begin to live from your soul. And that changes everything. The more you align with who you truly are, the more sensitive you become. Not in a fragile way, but in a truthful way. You begin to feel everything more deeply. The energy of a room, the weight of a conversation, the silence behind someone's words. It's as if your skin is thinner, your intuition louder, your perception sharper. What once felt neutral now feels intense. What you used to tolerate now feels unbearable. Noise crowds, forced smiles. They all begin to drain you in ways they never did before. And it's not because you're becoming weak. It's because your nervous system is no longer numb, it's awake. Carl Jung called this the integration of the unconscious, when parts of you that were once hidden begin to move into the light. And with that light comes feeling. Real, raw, unfiltered emotion. Not just your own, but the world's. You begin to sense things without being told. You feel the heaviness behind someone's laughter. You know when someone is speaking from truth and when they're speaking from fear. You can no longer unfeel. You can no longer ignore what your body tells you. And so you retreat, not to isolate, but to recalibrate. You begin to crave peace, not just the absence of noise, but the presence of harmony. You're drawn to nature, to slowness, to depth. You find yourself saying no more often, not out of resistance, but out of resonance. You no longer say yes to what depletes you. You no longer explain why. You just know. And this knowing is sacred. It's your intuition awakening. It's your body remembering what it means to be safe, to be real, to be aligned. And yes, this stage can feel lonely because you no longer fit where you once belonged. But the loneliness is honest. It's clean. It creates space for something new, for someone new, for a version of you that doesn't abandon itself to be loved. You start trusting the quiet more than the noise. You start feeling truth more than analyzing it. And in that space, you begin to live with a different compass, not logic, not pressure, not fear, but alignment. And the more you honor it, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're trying, but because you're finally at peace. And peace is the most powerful energy you can ever carry. There's a quiet that comes not from absence, but from alignment. It arrives after the storm, after the unraveling, after the questions that had no answers, and the nights that stretched too long. It's not the silence of giving up, it's the stillness of arrival. For the first time in a long time, you're not running, not chasing, not performing. You're simply here. And here feels different. Here doesn't demand that you explain yourself. Here doesn't require you to be impressive. Here is where you finally exhale. You've spent so much of your life in pursuit of goals, of worth, of belonging. But what if peace was never in the achieving? What if it was always waiting in the letting go? Carl Jung taught that peace comes not from perfection, but from wholeness, the integration of all that we are, light and shadow alike. And when you reach this point in your journey, you begin to understand that wholeness is not something you earn. It's something you uncover. It was always there beneath the striving, beneath the self-judgment, beneath the masks. You start to feel okay not knowing. Okay not having everything figured out. Okay being a work in progress. Because now progress no longer means doing more. It means being more honest, more present, more connected to what is real. The world may still spin fast, but you don't. You begin to move slower, with intention, with care. You start asking different questions. What nourishes me? What drains me? What would I choose if I wasn't afraid? And slowly, the answers come, not as lightning bolts, but as gentle knowing. You realize that you don't need to prove your worth. You only need to live it. You don't need to chase love. You only need to embody it. You don't need to escape your past. You only need to see it clearly and choose differently now. This is the space between becoming and being. It's where transformation settles, where integration begins. And while it may not look like much on the outside, on the inside, everything is changing. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer rejecting your path. You're no longer betraying your truth. You are here, whole, quiet, ready, not for perfection, but for presence. And that is more than enough. There comes a moment when you realize you're not going back. Not because you couldn't, but because you've changed. The path you once walked no longer calls to you. The version of you that fit there no longer exists. And though the road ahead is uncertain, you no longer belong where you came from. This is the threshold, the space between the old and the new, between who you were and who you're becoming. And crossing it isn't marked by fireworks or applause, it's marked by choice. The choice to honor what's rising instead of clinging to what's fading. It can feel both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because you've never felt so true. Terrifying because you've never felt so unguarded. But you're not empty, you're clear. And clarity is powerful. You begin to move differently. You say no with less guilt. You say yes with more intention. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. You stop needing approval to follow your joy. Carl Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't come from addition, it comes from subtraction. Peeling back the layers, letting go of roles, releasing attachments to old identities. And in that release you find yourself, not the self that was conditioned, but the one that was always there, quiet, steady, true. You feel stronger, but softer, more grounded, but more open. And perhaps for the first time, you feel safe within your own presence. You no longer seek to be saved. You've become your own sanctuary. You no longer wait to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And from this place of inner alignment, life begins to respond. Not because you're chasing, but because you're attracting. Not because you're striving, but because you're embodying. And still there may be moments of doubt, days when the old fears return. But now you recognize them for what they are, echoes, not truths. You no longer give them your power. You meet them with compassion, then keep walking forward. Because forward is the only direction that holds your soul. And as you take each step, you begin to understand. The best stage of your life isn't something that arrives all at once. It's something you build moment by moment, choice by choice, truth by truth. And the more you walk in alignment, the more you realize you're already living it. You don't always notice the moment it happens, but one day you wake up and the heaviness is gone. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped fighting yourself. You stopped trying to fit, stopped trying to force, stopped trying to earn what you finally understand was never meant to be earned. Your worth. It's not tied to output or performance or perfection. It's in your presence. And now that presence has changed. It's calmer, quieter, wiser. You've become someone who listens more than reacts, who sees patterns where there once was chaos, who trusts pauses more than promises. And this isn't because you've arrived. It's because you've surrendered the need to be someone else, surrendered the stories that kept you small, surrendered the weight of what no longer belongs to you. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and now you feel that truth in your bones. You no longer need to explain your healing. You no longer feel guilty for your peace. You no longer rush your process to make others comfortable. You've learned to honor your timing, your rhythm, your knowing, and in doing so, you've stepped into a deeper kind of living. It's not louder, but it's more alive. You savor more, notice more, appreciate more. Even the pain, even the uncertainty feels like it has a place now. It's not something to escape, but something to understand. And from that understanding, you've grown a resilience that isn't hard, but holy. The kind that bends without breaking, that softens without collapsing, that holds space for both doubt and devotion. You've become someone who doesn't fear beginnings because you know they come disguised as endings. And most of all, you've become someone who no longer waits for the perfect time, the perfect mood, the perfect plan. Because now you know the path is made by walking. And with every step, you write a new chapter one, where you are not just surviving, but truly, deeply, joyfully alive. You may wonder what comes next. After the unveiling of your true self, after the heavy lifting of transformation, what remains? It's simpler than you think. Grace. Not grace as perfection, but grace as acceptance and ease in being. You begin to move through life without the old armor, without the masks, without the constant need to prove, to perform, to push. And what you find is that the world doesn't fall apart. It doesn't come rushing in to consume you. Instead, you stand in your truth, and life reshapes around you. Your relationships deepen, not because you've changed them, but because you've shown up fully. Your choices become aligned, not because you've found a formula, but because you're guided by presence. Your challenges don't disappear, but you face them differently, with curiosity, with compassion, with the knowledge that you're whole even when you feel broken. Carl Jung spoke of the self, the center of our being. And when you align with the self, you tap into a field of coherence. Your mind is clearer. Your intuition is stronger. Your heart is more open. And as you navigate each day, you do so from a place of wholeness, not lack. You no longer fill yourself with things or achievements or the opinions of others. You fill yourself with presence, with intention, with love, and that changes everything. You live not in fear of failure, but in reverence for growth. Or you invest not in outcomes, but in being. And each day you practice this grace, not perfectly, but faithfully. Because transformation is not a once-in-a-lifetime event. It's a daily practice, a choice to remember who you are, to honor your truth, to walk your path with courage and compassion. So, if you feel the urge to return, not to what was, but to what is, embrace it. Let grace be your guide, and step into every moment knowing that you don't need to become more, just more yourself. And that is the beginning of the best stage of your life magnified. You've reached a place few ever allow themselves to go, not because they can't, but because it asks for everything false to be left behind. And that's not easy. It means walking away from roles that brought you praise, from versions of yourself that once kept you safe, from relationships built on who you were not, who you truly are. But you've done it, not perfectly, not without fear, but with courage. The quiet kind, the kind that doesn't shout, but stands. And here you are, still soft, still open, still willing to choose truth over comfort. You've stopped running. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped waiting for permission. Because now you understand you are not here to impress. You are here to express, to live a life that echoes your essence, to create from alignment, not anxiety, to belong to yourself before you belong to anyone else. Carl Jung believed that the true self is buried beneath layers of conditioning but never destroyed. And now you've met that self. Perhaps not fully, but deeply enough to know it's real. You no longer measure progress by how much you produce. You measure it by how honest you feel. You no longer chase connection from desperation. You invite it from wholeness. You are no longer afraid of silence. You've made peace with it. It speaks to you now. It reminds you that your presence is enough, that your being is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to honor. And still there will be days of doubt, moments when the old patterns resurface. But now you meet them with awareness. You greet them like old ghosts, not with fear, but with recognition. You've become a witness to your own growth. You've stopped asking the world to define you. You've begun writing your own definition with every choice, every boundary, every breath. And this is what it means to begin the best stage of your life. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are finally whole enough to live without pretending. You are finally free enough to love without losing yourself. You are finally wise enough to know that this life, this one breath, this one moment is sacred. You've stopped becoming. You've started being. And that shift, subtle as it is, changes everything. So here you are, at the edge of something new. Not because the world around you has changed, but because you have. You've walked through the doubt, the silence, the shedding, the remembering. You've faced the fear of letting go and the deeper fear of finally becoming. You've stopped asking, who should I be, and started living as who you already are. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now you know that privilege is not found in seeking, but in seeing. Not in chasing more, but in embracing enough. You don't need to be anything other than present. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to rush your growth. You are enough, here, now. This is not the end of your journey. It's just the beginning of a more honest one. One where your choices come from clarity, your words from truth, your love from overflow, not emptiness. One where you don't abandon yourself for connection, but connect more deeply, because you've come home to yourself. And as you move forward, not with pressure, but with peace, remember this: you are not behind, you are not broken, you are not lost, you are arriving. Every moment, every breath, every step, into a life that finally feels like it's yours, into the best stage of your life, not someday, but now.